So you're all welcome to Race Council's Diverse Voices sessions. This is actually a product of, brainstorming. We came together and we thought, how do we engage writers? Because we do have a lot of activities that involve painters, people who are into other kinds of creativity besides writing. So we decided to brainstorm and come up with a couple of ideas that will run through series of sessions. And this happens to be one of many sessions that will be coming on, from now till the end of the year. And I wanted to say something really important. Nature actually provides us with materials for literary expression. You can actually step out and you'll be inspired by the skies. You can actually be inspired by just somebody's dressing or the environment or the wind or literary, like anything. Anything could be, a source of inspiration for anyone. But for writers, it's actually different. It's beyond, just the obvious things that we see around. It could just be the way somebody smiles or the way somebody's hair sways and a couple of other things. So it was in that spirit that some of us here went out there to some, beautiful places, some, mountains and hills, and we came up with a lot of, some writings and all that. Please don't mind me. I'm nervous, but just manage it because I'm coming into character. It will flow very well very soon. Yeah, so I would like to call on Rebecca George, Shamita Pathakar, Lottie Williams. Yeah. So these three beautiful women actually went to different places, and they were inspired to write a couple of things that they will be sharing with us. And then after sharing it with us, I'll be running a series of questions with them. Then after that, we'll welcome, questions from the audience. And then after that, we'll welcome some questions from the audience. Okay, so let's go ahead. Yeah. I'd like you all to introduce yourselves. Let's start with you, Shamita.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for being here today. I'm Shamita Pathakar. I'm a recent MA graduate from Swansea University in creative writing, and I'm a nature writer, and I try my best to write, as much as I can. Whenever I go out, I collect ideas, I collect everything that inspires me, and I try to put it into words. So I'm really, really glad to be here today with three beautiful and inspirational writers with me. And they're also my really good friends and my course mates from my creative writing MA. So thank you so much for being here.
Welcome.
Hi, my name is Rebecca George. I am a local to this area. I came from Nice and currently live in Carmarthenshire. I'm on my MA at the moment, which I'm hoping to finish. I will be finishing in September. We'll be finishing in September. My husband will kill me if I don't. But my writing sort of stretches from very much character-driven pieces to screenwriting and plays, and doing non-fictional work is sort of just my personal sort of little thing that I love to do, because it gets me out of the house and not solely focused on people and actually looking at the world around me, because it is such a beautiful place. And these guys, like Chinyere said, we were all on the course together last year in Swansea, and these guys are just some incredible, poetic, beautiful writers that have just given me a passion and love for non-creative writing.
Lottie.
Hello, I'm Lottie Williams. I live in Carmarthen, and I love nature writing, and I also love to bring in eco-writing to it as well, with the climate and ecological emergency. So experience a bit of that in my writing today. Yes, I'm on my master's still, coming to the end of a 2-year course. Also a mum, and motherhood also features in my writing. And it's lovely to see you today, and thank you for inviting us along. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, so let's talk about the journey before we get into the pieces. I would like us to have an idea. What was it like? Where did you go to? What did it feel like? What is it about the place that really kind of inspired your writing? Because when you are writing, there is usually something I do. I don't know about any other person, but there is something you put in the middle, and then from that little thing, you expand your ideas. More or less like, that it becomes the focal point around which every other thing is woven. So I would like to know what it is for you, the journey, the experience, and then the inspiration that started the writing.
So
Take your time.
This is what she's going to do, and she puts us on the spot, and we go,
So what I do when I start my writing is basically I try to trace everything back to my roots, which is India. And I have been somebody who has traveled a lot around the Indian jungles as a volunteer for wildlife safaris. And so I've seen quite a few central Indian jungles. So what I try to do, most of my writing is focused around that. But when I came here, I realized that there is just so much more to write about, and this is just a brilliant city to be in. So everything that I write about is a combination of a memoir and creative non-fiction. So I try to club the two together, fetching things from my memory and then including everything that I am seeing here. I've tried to include as much as I can from both the countries, from the UK and from India. So I hope you guys like what I have written today.
We will love it. All right, Rebecca.
well, I have got a major interest in historical writing and fiction, and what a place has seen over the course of its lifetime and how it's grown. So I think that features in a lot of my writing is geophysical approach of what I've seen. And I think we went to Penard and stood on 3 cliffs and just were blown away by it's just incredible. And we were blown away by how amazing and beautiful and rugged this place was. And to me, I kind of took the idea of it's seen so much, what is it that it's seen? So that's where I kind of include that historical aspect as sort of a feature, I suppose, in my book. Yeah. I tend to anyway, try.
And I like to look at it through the eyes of my children. So when we go to places, I take myself back to my own childhood and fresh ways of looking at things, new ways of looking at old things. And just the innocence of children as well, and what might seem quite big to us is very small and special to them. And so I come at it from a children's perspective as well.
Okay. All right. So let's get into the pieces. Who do we start with? Do we do a ballot? Shamita. No way. Let's start with you, Lottie.
So whilst these 3 lovely ladies went to Penard, I couldn't make it on that day, so I went to my local, I should say, beach, San Stefan. I went up the castle there with 2 of my children. I want to find one of these. Betsy is pointing to the large sign in the car park, a map of the estuaries that form a 3-throated spill into Carmarthen Bay. Her gloved finger is resting by a picture of an oyster catcher standing on one leg, mid-step, its orange scissor beak closed in ready action. And one of these too. Her eyes have shifted to an image of a curlew, frozen in flight, brown and gold-flecked wings arched slightly forwards and then back, an open beak rounded like the curvature of the earth. Down on the beach, we may have spotted these wading birds, but instead we are heading up towards the castle, which stands proudly on the hill overlooking the village of Llanstefan. The sun is intermittent and, being only the start of March, bears little warmth. Betsy looks up. Mr. Coldcloud is out to play today. I smell bacon, Yeston says as we start to walk up the narrow path that joins the wider road to the castle. We fall quiet, breathing in the slightly acidic, smoky air. I catch sight of a nearby chimney whispering a cloud of grey. To our left, there is a field of sheep, coats long and scraggy from winter growth. The wool by their bellies is grey and matted, smattered by mud and probably taut with a layer of salt that has whipped up from the bay, settled into what once was soft. To my disappointment, there are no lambs. I'm yet to see any this year. I imagine their calls to their mothers, a high-pitched bleating, then a little jog from mouth to find teat, white tails wiggling with full, fat joy. I look up. On the hill above us sits Llanstefan Castle, the ruined stone walls etching a sharp silhouette against the sky. On the road we pass the vulture tree. Once it would have been a sprawling oak in the middle of a pasture, but now the remains of a shorn-off stump rises just 3 meters in height. It is abrupt in its stature, sliced open down one side to reveal a darker wood heart, completely dead. Fallen branches, now tombstone grey, lie heavy on the ground. A thud from many years ago, which I never heard, reverberates in my ears. The vulture tree has been struck by lightning several times, and before the last strike, a hollow in its trunk welcomed a nest of barn owls. A car comes by and we press ourselves into the hedgerow, which has been cut back. Ivy clings, as well as moss, polypody ferns and hart's tongue. The verges boast celandine flowers, variegated in colour, and several canary yellow flowers stretch up to the sun like little upturned parasols. Primroses dot the banks like smiling faces, the colour of butter. Catkins lengthen. Remnants of autumn are here too, the spring flowers having to creep around them first. Shrivelled bronze leaves, beech leaves wrap inwards like dry gnocchi, and crisp bracken lies flat against the bank. We run our fingers along the stems crackled by cold, and old leaves flake off into our palms. Shh! Look! A squirrel! Yeston is peering over the top of the hedgerow where, in fact, 2 squirrels fossick through leaf litter. A horn blares two-tone from across the water. Granny's train! For when my mum comes to stay. We walk hand in hand along the track until we reach the top. A fanfare of birdsong welcomes us to the castle. The rounded gatehouse is a domineering sight, and we enter through an archway of stone over 800 years old. Lichens colour the walls, salt lake grey, mustard yellow, splayed out like flattened plant specimens in a herbarium. This is where the bears live, says Betsy, in a hushed tone, as we squint into what we call the dungeons, but was once, in fact, the original entrance with portcullis grooves, murder holes, and arrow loops. From the gatehouse we climb up a tight spiral staircase to the topmost floor, which is where the wall becomes ruin, stones suddenly rearing up in jagged formations like the summit of Trivan in Eryri. The steps are narrow, and my walking boots stub each rise, my hands wrapping the inner spine, worn smooth by generations. I worry about the children, slipping and falling on this hard, carved rock, but they are fine. Yeston reaches the top long before I do, the wariness in my age in step beside me. There is a metal rod at the top, with locks attached along its length, promises of love forever rusted by the sea, the wind, the rain, the sun, Matthew and Maddie, Matilda and Olivia, Stephen and Tasha, Dylan and Steph. Below us, the land stretches out. The Towie estuary meets Carmarthen Bay, kissing the sandbanks in little white welcomes. From Ferryside, a village of multicoloured houses on the opposite bank, the train line runs around the sweep of the bay to Pembrey. On the horizon, the Gower stretches out like a dragon's back, its sleeping head resting in the surf of Worm's Head. The water is so still and dapples a reflection of the sky, where the tide ripples sand, where the sand is really mud, where the wading birds meet and the mud feeds the cockle pickers' buckets. I close my eyes against its beauty, shut them hard, tight. I cannot help it. I always do this. I want to ignore the years that are to come, only bask in this present among reminders of the past. Standing here, on a site that has been occupied by people for over 2,500 years, it should be easy. It should. We are walking in our ancestors' footsteps, treading the same stone under the same sky. We are right now at the edge of existence. But I am holding my children's hands, and I cannot ignore the future. Standing in this ruin, I cannot ignore the threat to the houses nestled below in the village, to the community over the estuary and Ferryside that watch us now, unblinking windows all facing west. I cannot ignore the problems that will come to the train line as it winds its way around the scenic route. Granny's train. What will get to it first? The rising sea level, or the increasing storms as they purge the coast, waves reclaiming the land? More has changed in the last 50 years than the last 6,000. This castle still stands. How long will we? I force myself to open my eyes and look. It really is beautiful. I take a picture, capture this moment. Perhaps I will buy a lock, write our names on it too, and immortalize ourselves in rust. Thank you.
To ease, let's have breaks in between. So let's talk about Lottie's writing. There was something you said when you introduced yourself. She called it, that she said that her writing has a tone of ecological emergency. Mm-hmm. And then I can see that running through the entire writing, because you are not just eulogizing nature, you are also advocating for the protection of nature. Mm-hmm. And then there's this tone of Armageddon. Like, I want you to talk about all of that.
Okay.
I want you to talk about all of that.
Well, I suppose I don't really like to write about too much doom, because there is quite a lot of doom out there, and anxiety is a massive thing. But I think sometimes you can't always end on a positive note, because yes, we can come in positively and we can get sucked into the beautiful imagery, and then we can touch upon what's not right with everything, but then we can go back to a safe place of what's beautiful, and then finish and then carry on our way. I think by including at the end, it therefore has more impact, and that's what we therefore kind of take away with ourselves, because we cannot ignore what's happening, but also we need to call to action. But on this particular journey that I went on, I did get a sense of, this is where we're at. What on earth is going to happen next? I don't have the answers for that. So I couldn't really bring that positivity back to the end.
Okay, let's talk about your children.
Mm-hmm.
I like the marriage of the human nature with the flora and the fauna. Mm-hmm. So I want you to talk about that. Like, is this something you do, like, with all of your writing? Because I noticed, like, most of your writing, you dwell so much on nature preservation, on ecological emergency, and the need for us to act like more or less advocacy. But I also noticed that you try as much as possible to touch on the human nature, the place of humanity in the whole of that setting.
Yeah.
So I want you to talk about that.
Well, I mean, we are nature. At the end of the day, we're not anything more than that. We're not more than. Nature, to be honest, is more than us. We are just here, and we have, taken for granted everything that is on offer. So by bringing my children into it, I suppose I'm looking to the future in a kind of a more positive way. They'll be here, hopefully after I've gone, touch wood, and it's just what they can bring to it. And I think a lot of people will be able to what's the word? They'll be able to understand. I've lost the word. They'll be able to grasp and understand what it's like to be parents or to be godparents or to have nieces and nephews. And so I think that brings, that human aspect of it into it. It kind of gives that familiarity to it.
All right. Before we move away from Charlotte, who happens to be into ecological emergencies and the human nature in the place of the animal or the arboreal nature and all that, let's move to Rebecca. But let me say something before Rebecca comes on. I see Rebecca as the great Matthew Arnold, because when I got to Swansea University, I was opportune to do a profile of Rebecca, and Rebecca gave me a history of Planetly and Need and Talks, and then married it with her personal experience. So we're about to see a historical sense in her writing. So Rebecca, you have the floor. You might want to dramatize your performance a little bit.
I'm not going to act it, don't worry.
Because I know you.
We're good. I'm going to put this here.
All right.
Okay, right. Sorry if I stumble over my words. I've had a bit of a cold this week, so I blame standing on Three Cliffs. Okay. As I stood on top of the Three Cliffs Bay, a rugged, weather-beaten coastline that extends into barley-covered sands, the tide edging away from the shore, there was a vastness that could only be described as breathtakingly wild. I couldn't help but wonder what the first settlers must have seen and felt. Is this the edge of the world, or is this the beginning of it? Facing the limit of the Welsh coastline, a sheer drop down limestone cliffs could easily plunge me into a watery darkness, or even into a legendary cave. I thought how ferocious the periphery of Wales could be. I thought about the lives this place had seen, the simple breath of living. My eyes were lit with wonder, and honestly, a little scared of falling. The Gower, such a small part of the world, can trace its whispered echoes back to Neanderthal times, with the Red Lady of Paviland, who later turned out to be a male from 30,000 years ago. Homo sapiens later evolved and came along, lived, traded, grew. Humans found their way around the valleys shaped by glaciers. They left behind evidence of Mesolithic, Neolithic, Bronze Age, and Iron Age lives that are now housed in national independent museums dotted around the country. Romans came a-calling many times, leading to the rise of kingdoms that still mark Welsh borders. Stories passed into writings of the Mabinogion. Folklore, myths became legends, all heard from the world from these very shores. Indeed, nearby the backbone of Gower, at Kevin Bryn, is King Arthur's stone. Legend has it a small stone removed from the sole of his shoe, which King Arthur threw across the Lough estuary as he travelled from Merlin's town. The stone landed at Kevin Bryn, where it grew in size. It grew to be a 25-ton capstone. We fought to survive from our people, and storm-tossed lands, and in between we were invaded by the Vikings, the Marcher Lords, the Normans, and later the English. When those invaders arrived and stood on our shores, did they seek to capture its exceptional beauty and harness its dramatic wildness? Did they pause to see the muted tones of marram grass and the deep cyan blue gently lapping the shores and think, this is now my home? Or did they see the jagged, sharp cliffs and think that could protect all that live on it? I walk and stand beside the desolate ruins of remains of Penard Castle, built by Henry de Beaumont, the first Earl of Warwick, a loyal friend and companion to Henry I. Henry was known as Henry Beauclerc, the good writer king. Henry gave the lordship of the Gower over in 1107, and more castles followed: Oystermouth, Locher, Penrhys, Llanryddion, Swansea. Castles that are strong, harsh and impenetrable, much like the cliffs when seen from dark blue waters. Fortresses forged in pure Welsh limestone. These days they offer us solace and comfort to the visitors they attract. A chance to visit a captured moment of glorious kingdoms dotted along much of the Welsh coastline. At Penard, many people sat along the very foundations. A family with the young children blowing bubbles out to sea. Visitors milling around the ruins. Dogs roam around me, seeking attention while their owners took in the view. Hikers go past in cheerfully coloured mountain gear that seems at odds with the natural colours of the land on a cold February day. Penard Castle was abandoned within 200 years of its creation, with the very folk rumoured to be the cause. Those very folk just wanted to dance and celebrate the wedding of their princess friend. So playing joyous music, they arrived late in the evening, but they had not been invited by the Lord. Drunk and enraged, he threatened with the sword, and the very folk upset uttered, "Since thou hast, without reason, broke upon our innocence, they shall be without castle and feast." Black clouds obscured the moon, darkening the bay, and suddenly a storm burst through the midnight sky and covered the castle in swirling sandstone. All that is left of the remnants of the past, the gatehouse, a curtain wall, and part of the tower still gripped to the cliffside. Yet life is still thriving here, and not just from the people that visit. Clumps of daffodils begin to offer their presence under the protection of medieval walls, and the sands swirl in the breeze, still causing mischief. In a few weeks, the small, rare yellow whipgrass will emerge, clinging to the limestone crevices, softening the staggering landscape's appearance. Like a daffodil or gorse flower, the bright yellow shade will stand out like a golden star against the backdrop of looming cliffs. The sea will warm and be full of paddle boarders, and vacationers visiting the area of outstanding beauty. They will come to marvel at the high tide that will cut off the triangle weather-worn prism closing between the cliffs. Stories will be told over small campfires on the beach, maybe about mermaids sealing shut jeweled encrusted cabins, or even the very folk playing tricks on the golfers above. It is only when you look up from the beach and away from the castle that modern life faces the perimeter of the Welsh lands. An 18-hole golf course with clubhouse, besieged by executive cars, a mere walking distance from a medieval castle that would have concerned itself with knights and horses over the perfect path. Large homes surround the narrow, winding country road. A 1920s water tower that I later discovered was built to lush the greens of Swansea's oldest golf club, all to take in the view that stretched to the English coastline on clear days. Up the links in the sky, the golf course sits 65 feet high above the beach, overlooking the meandering Penard Hill below. Golfers continue to strike their small rubber balls with aluminium clubs, contributing to the rush of wear and the soft thwack up to the soundtrack of my visit. They pleasantly give right way to the roamers, dog walkers, and horses strolling through. Right of way contained between white marker stones that lead you across a common. As I head back to my car, a little way up is St. Mary's Church, a Grade II listed chapel and restored medieval church. The original was abandoned due to the encroaching sand. Nigel Jenkins, Harry Webb, and Vernon Watkins are buried in this churchyard, and I wonder what Henry Good King writer would say of these great Welsh writers. Vernon Watkins was inspired by many of his walks across the Three Cliffs wrote in his poem Taliesin and Gower. Late I return, O violent, colossal, reverberant, eavesdropping sea. My country is here. I am full, violet. Hawthorn breaks from my hands. I watch the inquisitive cormorant pry from the praying rocks of Pwllheli, then skim the gull's white colony to Oxford's cobblestone sands. It is easy to see why so many people follow the waters, whether from the streams or the bays to these cliffs, and somewhere it can be reasoned that is to keep in the company of kings, legends, writers, or even rare species. But as I stand here in the part of the world that I call my home, I would like to think the feeling of vastness and possibility has ignited something extraordinary in any who have seen the Three Cliffs Bay.
Wow. You know, there is a serenity that comes with literature, with creativity, with writing, and with words. It's almost like a lullaby. So now it seems like the room is a bit sleepy, and I would like to, you know, shake things up a little bit. So can you give us some drum beats, please, before we start to answer some questions? Let's vibrate this room a little bit. So let's give Rebecca a round of applause for her. I hope that was enough shake-up. So let's ask Rebecca questions. Yeah. So Rebecca, I noticed that when you're writing, there is this sense of place. You know, being Welsh and writing about a place in Wales, you seem to like attach history to everything you do. Historical people, historical monuments, historical experiences, and then you attach it to what you are seeing at the moment. I want you to marry all of that. You know, what is it for you, you know?
I started off writing a historical fiction, so everything I've done has had an air of history attached to it. It's been in the last year or so that I've sort of stepped away from concentrating so much on historical and focusing on people and their lives and bringing something a lot more up to date. So I have an ability to stand in two different camps, which is really hard to marry in the middle. But I think there's something there's a Welsh word called hiraeth. Does anyone know it?
Yes.
Can you repeat that?
Hiraeth.
I'm learning Welsh, by the way.
Hiraeth. We'll talk about it after. Hiraeth.
Hiraeth.
We'll work on some Ashley as well. So hiraeth is about a sense of belonging, which apparently only Welsh people feel, and it's like a connection to the homeland, and it's like a homesickness that can't be explained, which is why the word has come about. Hiraeth, it's a feeling of that, and maybe it's just manifesting itself in my writing when I talk about home and talk about Wales.
Okay.
I don't know. I think I can look at things a little bit more objectively when I've written in different parts of the world, but when it's something Welsh, it just feels a little bit more Hyrthian? I don't know, I might be coining a new word there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I could actually connect your writings to that of Jeffrey Dyer.
Oh.
Yeah, because he has a way of giving personality to places, to things, and all that. So I want you to talk about, is it possible for us to feel, you know, a sense of loss, and at the same time a sense of, I don't want to use a big word, nostalgia, you know, about home, while being in home? Is it, you know, the present as it relates to the past? Because while you were reading, you were going through King Arthur, the knights, and I remember when we made that trip, we were busy giving us a history of the stones, a history of everything, telling us, oh, back in the days the soldiers will mount here and have a bird's eye view of the place and ensure security and all that. So I want you to, you know, just talk more about that.
I think it's something that's just been sort of ingrained into me. Where I grew up is in Neath, is Skewing, and when I was going to school, I would walk past an abandoned monastery, and walking up the canal path, my grandfather, who we've talked about before, used to tell me all these facts and little stories and anecdotes of the things that I was walking past, and it's probably become ingrained into me that when I go somewhere, my kids would probably be like, oh, she's talking again. My son's just nodded. She's gone on about this happened here. But I find it fascinating to think that I'm walking in the footsteps or walking behind in the footsteps of events that have gone on before me, and I wonder what they were thinking when they were walking those particular paths. And it makes me think, if I'm thinking about them, then somebody in the future, I hope, might be thinking about something that I have said when they are walking the same paths that I've walked. And they might go, oh, yes, hang on a minute, somebody told me something about that once. And I think it's just passing on of stories that, who knows where they've come from, because stories have been written down. They weren't always, they were told as stories at campfires. It's only later, medieval times, that things got formalised and language got written down. Sorry, can you tell I'm an English teacher on like the side here? I go into like, where did language come from? And I think that's passing on of stories is what makes us human and makes us different, because every culture all over the world does it. We comfort ourselves with stories and myths and legends. We tell each other something to get us through bad times and to make ourselves feel positive about the future. And our stories, thinking about destruction and Armageddon, are a warning for us that many years ago would have been told in small little groups. And I think now we're on a stage of modern culture that everything is so shared on social media, and we can read it in a book and it's all there and accessible. And I think just taking a moment and walking through a place and thinking, well, what else has happened here? Just that moment. What else can I see that the trees and the grass and the flowers are not telling me? What about the people and the lives that have walked through this path?
Amazing.
So yeah.
That's really good.
Shut up.
All right. We've listened to two Welsh female writers, and then we've been able to understand Wales from the angle of history, from the angle of the need for us to do better with nature. And now we're about to go to another territory that is not like the ones we've heard before. So here is Shamita, who, like me, migrated from India, and then we went to Penard, the Tree Cliff. I'm sure you are looking at those, these things from the angle with your Indian eye and wondering and making comparisons within the homeland and the new home, away from home. So let's listen to Shamita's piece.
Is very much in the moment, so everything that I observed when I went there and everything that Rebecca was educating me about, so I've combined all of that with my love for nature. That was really fun.
Okay.
So my piece is called The House Between the Hills, and you will know why it is called so by the end of this. A few months ago, I remember how homesick I was, sitting in my snug little apartment on a bleak rainy day, listening to the patter of fine rain, trying to write an article about the places I had visited in South Wales for an Indian magazine. It's been exactly 1 year and 5 months since I moved to Swansea from my hometown, Pune, but I'm still awed by the beauty of Wales. For a person who has spent her whole childhood bopping from one country to another, I craved for the comforting peace that being out in nature can bring, a sense of escape from my immersive world bound by a 9-to-5 and the humdrum of work life. I still vividly remember the very first thing I did when I moved into my accommodation at the Singleton campus before I even unpacked. It was September 2021. Outside, I could see strips of clouds on the horizon shimmering with golden light, and so I went for a quick stroll along the beach. As the wintry breeze sighed in the trees, the wispy grey sky was not empty of gulls. I picked up a handful of shells and popped them into my pocket, and breathed in the salty air and let the richness and the reality of it all calm my racing pulse. I had travelled 7 seas away, as they said in my language, but there was nothing more I wished for in that moment of contentment. As I walked back to the campus, with shells jangling in my coat's pocket, I felt as happy as a child tasting an ice cream for the very first time. Though I tried to visit as many scenic places as I could since last summer, including an impromptu road trip to North Wales with my friend's achingly bizarre Spotify playlist, one of my favorite places to keep visiting is the Three Cliffs Bay. I was thrilled when Rebecca told me on the morning of our little adventure that we would be going there instead of the location that we had initially agreed upon. After a round of driving back and forth to find a parking spot, a quick discussion on which way would lead us where, and an exchange of tote bags to suit the hike, we began walking towards Penard Castle amidst a golf course that stretched as far as I could see, ensuring that we walked only on the part designated for non-golfers, flanked by large white stones. It was a windy, clean February afternoon. Patches of parsley green grand surrounded the castle, and a subtle sweet scent imbued with dew hung in the air. The sand was marked by the footprints of hundreds of visitors and their pets, as if an artist had deliberately created an abstract polka pattern on it. A few meters away from the castle stood a transparent board that displayed a simple outline of what the castle had looked like in the past, perfectly positioned to give us an idea of the complete structure from where we stood. It's quite interesting. We walked through the gatehouse as Rebecca told both she and I the history of the castle, talking us through the architectural aspect of it, how the gates would have worked back then, the arrow slits that we were looking at, the curtain wall that overlooked the Three Cliffs Bay. On one side, a window-like shape within the wall revealed a stunning view of beryl blue streams that gently curved through the trees in the distance. We stood at the edge of the valley, taking in the sheer splendor of the bay. Cords of soft lift rolled out from above, bathing the cliffs in the distance. An almost horseshoe-like stream lay in the middle of the green valley. The sea beyond it was tranquil, sky above discoloring like a slow old bruise. From the edge, we made our way down the sandy path. Conversations between us flowed, and we made it a point to click as many pictures as we possibly could before the last of the light was gone. The path was steep, but we managed to reach the foot of the cliff, walking along a cobbled trail down the beach. Hikers in nylon pants, vellies, and backpacks ambled along the beach, while their dogs chased a ball or jumped in the stream nearby. Around the cliff's edge, grey boulders had a pattern that resembled white brushstrokes, while others were covered in moss or seafoam green barnacles. We spent a good few minutes among the boulders to get to the other side. There, along the shore and among bright seaweed that lay in tangled blotches like a mermaid's hair, we chatted and laughed, shared funny stories, and posed for photographs. As we headed back to the starting point with dabs of wet sand on our track pants and sea air, we climbed up the sand dunes that took the shape of a human spine, stopping every so often to enjoy the breathtaking view from above. The aching cold now crept into the evening, and sunlight was replaced by wintry clouds that looked like puffs of smoke. Tufts of lime green murrung grass danced in the breeze, its elongated shape forcing it to lay flat in some areas and stand up in the others. Just as we neared the golf course again, the three of us noticed a restful house between the hills, which compelled us to have a conversation about the experience in living such a place, as if the opportunity had actually presented itself. We came to the conclusion that the idea definitely seemed like a lavish one, but probably not something that we were entirely comfortable with. Nonetheless, I imagined myself reading by one of the windows that overlooked the bay, watching the sun set in swirls of silky salmon pink upon a lavender sky. We made our way back through the golf course and towards the car park. 100 ideas swimming in our head for creative pieces, and how this experience could just ever be described in only 1,000 words.
Wow, amazing. So Shamita has been writing about nature for the longest time. And I know you actually have a blog where you write about, your safari experience and all of that. So I'd like you to make a comparison. You've been doing this over time. Mm-hmm. Moving from India to Wales, what changed in terms of your writing material?
Well, initially, I was actually not a creative non-fiction writer. I have worked in the media and advertising industry for almost 4 years now. So I was very, very accustomed to writing content that was very focused on just the facts and nothing creative including in it. So when I had my first safari many years ago, that was what inspired me to actually write about nature, because that first safari was something that absolutely blew my mind. And like you said, obviously there are a million different things that I can tell you about the Indian jungles and some things here, because I haven't been here for the longest time, so I can't say much about Wales, and I haven't been around a lot as well. But I think one of the major difference is, of course, that when I came here, I felt this sort of comfort and a kind of peace in which I could actually write something, because I live in a very metropolitan city, and as much as I love my city, it is extremely busy and crowded at all times of the day. So there is no thing called rush hour, it's just all times are rush hour. And
More like a city that never sleeps.
Yeah, a city that never sleeps. And I actually had to make time and go to these jungles where there was no network at all, just so I could concentrate and write. Yeah, and find all of the material that I wanted to write. But here, when I came here, the first thing I did was I went to the beach. It was during COVID, so there were not a lot of people, and I felt like a child tasting an ice cream for the very first time. I felt amazing. I felt like it was something that I had been dreaming of for ages, was to come to a place where I could sit in that sort of peace and write. Just the silence was actually so loud that it allowed me to write something. So that was, I think, one of the major differences that I would say sort of changed my writing style. And what I write in my blog is mainly about, a little bit about the jungles, but mostly about when you should visit it, how you can visit it, because all of these jungles are in such remote places that not a lot of people know how to reach that place. So it's more of a blog to give people information about these forests, and there are a few things you can do right before you go into the jungle. Like you can hire guides and drivers that would actually help you to get good sightings of tigers, leopards, or whatever animals you want to see there. So that the blog is more of like an informational one. But when I came here and when I started writing for myself, I felt like everything around me was inspiring me to do just that. So,
Amazing. So I would like to ask, because I've read a couple of your pieces, you write a lot about the animal nature. So I was expecting you to dwell so much on the happy canines running around the beach and trying to grab on only Rebecca for some weird reasons, and then run away from me, like, I was hoping you could capture all of that, but, fortunately, I don't want to use that word, unfortunately. Fortunately, you actually steered your writing more to the physical, and then to you in the place of all of that. So did you feel like a fish out of water? Doing something different, writing about a terrain that is totally different to what you usually do? Because most of your writing, I've read the cormorants, I've read the one about the safari and all that, and then you describing the relationship between the tiger and the cubs, and So I would like you to talk about that.
Yeah.
Did you deliberately avoid the dogs?
I did a little bit, yeah, I think you caught that, because I did not want to focus it too much on the dogs and the people walking the dogs or the kids, or just because I wanted to write something different, and I know that I focus too much on the animals when I write about a place. But to be honest, the Indian jungles have quite a wide variety of flora and fauna. So there is a lot you can write about, and every experience that I've had there is just, it's so special to me, because it's not like you go into a jungle and you just see a tiger. It's not like the African safari. It's completely different, and it takes you about, I think, maybe an entire day to track just one tiger if you want to get a photograph. So it's all the guides and the drivers who do the work for us. But I think the main reason why I did not write about it is because I wanted to focus more on everything that I was observing when we went to see the castle and Three Cliffs Bay, and a little bit about the atmosphere, the colors, because I absolutely love including colors in my writing. So I tried as best as I could to include things that I observed, like the sunset. I mean, we didn't really see the sunset, but I had been there with my friend here. And yeah, she's somebody who takes me to a lot of beautiful places. So we always catch the sunset just in time. I love writing about color, so that's what I've tried to do here. And just all the physical aspects that we could see. And yeah.
Let me share a little secret about Shamita. You know, when we came to Swansea, and I and Shamita, two immigrants, you know, we were looking for jobs and all that. And then I asked Shamita, what kind of job would you like to do? She said, Chinyere, anything that has to do with walking a dog, taking care of a dog. And then I swung into action. I went online. I was searching dog walker needed. And then I started sending her all the references. Shamita, somebody somewhere needs somebody to walk their dog.
I absolutely love animals.
You know, not knowing. Then days later, I will find out that Shamita is actually a content writer. Such combination. All right, I'm going to leave this open now because we've been enjoying their writings. Rebecca with the ecological emergency. Sorry, Lottie with the ecological emergency. Rebecca with the historical sense. Shamita with a sense of colors and feelings. I would like you to ask them questions. Really, you know, the floor is open now. Do you need me to shake things up a little bit more? Do you need some shaking? Can you give us some shaking?
It's drumming. Can we dance as well then?
Let's start, Eric. Novel. All right, Eric, you're welcome.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, this is Eric Charles.
Hang on. Now, let me just put this out there just in case. Eric is the name my mother calls me if I've done something wrong.
Okay. Eric? Yeah.
Oh,
So his name is Eric Oscar Chima Charles Ngalle.
wonderful.
And there is history behind each of the names. So Eric, let's meet you.
Thank you. So Eric is the name my mother calls me when I've done something wrong. If she wants to give me food, she calls me Elikie. Now there's a song that my mother sings, and every time she sings this song, it only means one thing. She hasn't cooked. And the song goes something like this. Ongo mukala mungo mawakbe awea akele moto raidelepe. Ongo mukala mungo mawakbe awea akele moto raidelepe onya moeve. Onya moeve raidelepe. You know, as writers, there are things that fascinate us. So if you read Owen Shear's books, he talks about growing up on the mountains of Fiji. And he came here when he was 4 years old. But he still travels to Fiji mentally. And our friend from Cabalven as well, what's his name? Horatio Clare. He writes about places, but he transforms himself into a swallow. So so when he finds himself in South Africa, he becomes an Inkunjan, which means the bird that brings the rain. In Cameroon, he will become an Eroli, which means the bird that sucks nectar from hibiscus flowers. So I am fascinated by places.
Okay, so we have introduced Eric. I wanted to whet your appetite a little bit before giving you something to literally whet your appetite. So before Eric goes into all of that, because Eric's work has a sense of enchantment, it kind of pulls you in. Yes, I saw a picture of Eric somewhere on the net singing in Bakweri to the rivers of Wales. And I'm like, come on, Eric. The rivers, the spirit of the river, they can't even hear the language you're speaking. But
That's what I thought, that actually they
so
came.
Eric was teaching them to speak Bakweri by the seaside. And it was amazing to behold. It was a beautiful picture. I think I saved that on my phone. And then anytime he wins an award or goes for something and I want to say congratulations, Eric, I just put it up there, you know. And he has another one with Mr. Taz. They were by the riverside. I think they were drinking beer or something.
No, I thought you deleted it.
Oh, no, I caught it before you could delete it. I saved a copy for myself. So I could count you on this like this. So now that we've gotten a touch of Eric, I would like us to just take a walk and just have something to eat so that we can continue. I don't want you to be far. Can you shake the room up a little bit?
I've got a hot drink.
All right, so that's something to start with. So Eric, let's talk about. Can you introduce yourself once more? Tell us a little bit more about yourself beyond just your writing, and tell us about yourself because we're about to delve into your memoir and your poetry, which is more or less products of personal experience. So we'd like to get a feel of that experience, from you.
Thank you so much, Chima. That's my name. That's your name.
Chinyere.
So Chinyere baptized me Chima. So actually, technically, I could be a Nigerian. But actually, I could pass on a Nigerian, because my mom is from Calabar. I've never been to Nigeria. So thank you for rebaptizing me. So my name is Eric Ngalle Charles. I'm a Cameroonian who's living in Wales, and I've been living in Wales since the July of 1999. And you were talking about, where's Rebecca? Hello, Rebecca. You spoke about Hiraeth. In 2018, I traveled to Cameroon with the National Poet of Wales, Mr. Ivor Abglin. And I was fascinated by this man because meeting the National Poet of Wales is something, you have. So I looked him up and I came across his poem. And the poem was titled Uganda. So when I read the poem, I made a lot of assumptions. I just thought Mr. Ivor had been to that part of the continent. But he hadn't. He did what Tennyson did when Tennyson wrote the Charge of the Light Brigade. He saw newspaper clippings and he wrote this poem. So we went to Cameroon and we launched the book called Hiraeth, and its Cameroonian equivalent, or its Bakweri equivalent, or its Bantu equivalent of a rolly. Now for Welsh writers, if you look Bethany Rivers' work, she says Hiraeth is that music that plays in your head constantly. If you read Mena Elfin will tell you that because of the mountains and the hills of Wales, Hiraeth becomes that longing for that place. And the Portuguese version of Hiraeth is Saudade, which is that longing for someone that you once loved, knowing that they will never return. It's a very powerful thing.
There is a song by Westlife, Soledad.
I have no idea who Westlife are.
Oh my goodness! All you know is just books and literature. Who knows Westlife? Please blow me out. Who knows Soledad? The song, the music. Do you know the song? Soledad is the oh God. It's about longing. Where a beloved is longing for somebody that is no longer within reach. And so they were singing about it. The lyrics, is very, very deep and very, it could almost make you cry because this person really, really loved, this someone, but they can't reach them, they can't touch them because those people at the moment are maybe out of their lives or something, something like that.
So it was important for me to find its Bantu Bakuri equivalent of Hiraeth. So we have it, and it is called a Rolly. So the first Welsh African or Cameroonian anthology is called Hiraeth, a Rolly. And a Rolly for us is, again, in 1998, when I was in Russia, a terrible, terrible incident happened. I was taken hostage by about 30 Cameroonians, and I was tortured to the point of death. And as I was about to give up the ghost, these guys used hot knives, and they placed them on my body. It didn't really matter for me because I would have preferred to be killed by strangers than what my father's family did. However, when this story reached my mom, they told her that I had been killed and buried in a shallow grave in Russia. For a number of months, my mom had this rolly. She was like, a rolly November, a rolly November, engenya kambura, awani mbeti, a longing for a son that she loved.
Can you repeat it again? I love it. No, there's this transport that comes with it.
I forgot the song now.
All right, I think it's the moment.
So she spent so many months by the fireside in her kitchen, and she was singing this song, a longing for someone, her son that she loved, knowing that I will never return. But in 2017, I went back to Cameroon for the first time, and I met my mom at the airport. So even though we'd been talking, she still had that shock, but she did something weird. She never called me Eric. She called me Oscar, my father's name. And I'm like, this confrontation between my mom and I, because when I was about 12, we used to go past the printing press, and my mom would stop by this window, and she would look at the window, and I'm like, Mom, what are you doing? Why are you looking at this window? And she was like, that's where I first saw your dad. And I don't know about you, but you cannot ask your mom, like, Mom, did you love my dad? I asked. So she never said she loved my father. But this is what she did. She said, she started singing a song. Eveta koko emonyanga maja, maja, mokia maja. In 2017 at the airport, my mom sang that song.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Almost like she was saying,
my father.
She saw your father in you.
Yes. Hiraeth. It's my favorite word. It's my favorite song. Yeah.
Okay. So Eric, I would like to ask you something about this. This is Eric's book. I've been struggling for this book with my children. They won't read it, but they won't let it stay in one place. So pardon the look of it, but this is Eric's book. It's titled I, Eric Ngalle. And talking about the
Hiraeth.
Yeah, and the I, Eric Ngalle. What is it about Eric Ngalle that is, that made you put pen to paper to tell the story of Eric? There has to be something very unique about your journey that stands you out, because not everybody will, I wouldn't like to write about myself if there isn't something interesting about my journey that I would like to share with everybody. I do write pieces about my relationship with my children. I'm sure you guys have heard, lots of that. But for you to put it into a memoir,
yes.
So tell us that. I want to know the high point of the story.
Yes.
That brought this together.
Yeah. So by the time I came to Wales in July 1999, all I had were my memories. The memories of growing up in Cameroon until the age of 17, the 2 years and 2 months that I spent in Russia, and how I mysteriously got to Wales. as a 64-year-old Zimbabwean when I was just 20.
Wow.
And it became problematic because people will call me and say, oh, Eric, can you come on stage and tell us how you got to be here? And I was thinking, what aspect of my memories do you want me to share with you? I couldn't. So when Richard proposed the title for this book, I had to go with Eric Ngalle because I had lost everything. I left Cameroon as Eric Charles. I came to the UK as Mr. Osmili Tamvani Manjola from Bulawayo. In between, they had given me so many names. So Eric Ngalle, even though Richard said it is one man's journey crossing continents from Africa to Europe, effectively I was looking for my name. You know, I was lost. However, I have to take you back to when I was 8 years old because I think this is where this book should start. Until the age of 8, my name was Morimongwa Ngalle. I was named after my grandfather, who was a chief. Father Francis came from Bangor. Bangor is about 4 hours from here. And he was part of the Catholic missionaries. And they came to the village and they were going to baptize us. This didn't bother me. On the eve of my baptism, my mom goes to me and says, oh, More, let's go to the market. You can choose whatever you want from this market. I chose a cheerful looking chicken. I came home, I fed the chicken as it was only polite. Now, before I introduce myself to you guys, I said there's a song that my mother sings, and every time she sings that song, it means one thing. She hasn't cooked. That morning, I woke up, I fed the chicken as it was polite. I dressed myself in white shirt because Father Francis told us that our sins had made us black. Upon being baptized, we become white as snow. So we all dressed in white. My friend Peter, his mother could not afford to buy him white garments, so they actually painted him white with chalk. I went to the church. Father Francis made all of these promises and said when we were baptized, there will be white doves falling from the ceiling. We actually don't have doves in Cameroon. So we could have, that was the first lie. Then my names were changed from Morimongwa Ngalle to Eric Charles. But as an 8-year-old boy, I didn't really care about my name change. I was coming home to eat my chicken. I came out the church, all the rich families were outside dancing, jumping around. I had my hands on my back and I walked up the hills. Now our house has a hibiscus flower fence. And beyond the fence, I could hear, Ongo Mokala. My mom was singing that song. I'm thinking, Mama, not today. Not today, Mom.
The song of no.
She hasn't cooked. It was a very windy day. And she swept the dust in one direction, the wind blew it back into the other direction. So she was just spinning around and singing that song. And I entered the kitchen where my chicken was kept. There was just a rope. So I'm like, I come outside and I say, Mom, either you kill me today or this is it. She's singing that song. Of course, I could not fight with my mom because she's a princess. But that evening, my mother called me in the parlor. And she said, in order to thank Father Francis for baptizing me, she gave the dude my chicken. Seriously. So when I came to Wales in July 1999, Mr. Emmanuel Habimana took me to Sainsbury's. And I saw all these chickens. Yes. So this is where that story should have started. But unfortunately, it started when I was...
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Did your baptism hold any weight for you? I mean, after the chicken was given to the baptizer?
I've been to Bangor twice. I haven't seen Father Francis.
Okay.
I need my chicken back. No, but you see... No, as writers, especially where we are now in terms of cross-cultural and this intersectionality, if I were to create the perfect protagonist, it would be an 8-year-old child who goes to look to find his chicken. And then fast forwarding now, and I can do what Benjamin Woodman has done in his book, A Journey to a Place Better, where 35 years later, this protagonist is looking back at the chicken incident. So not only did he lose his chicken, he lost his name. And I think this is it's a very simple story, but it poses a lot of post-colonial kind of discourse. So yeah, I had to write Ngalle because I came to Wales and all I had were my memories. And I could not articulate myself, so they will ask me. So what I did was, I used to hide behind languages. One of my languages that I hide in is the Russian language. And I remember when I was in Clanditno, Peter Finch put me on stage and said, "Oh, tell us how you got to be in Wales." I found myself reciting the great black Russian, Alexander Pushkin. I found myself reciting his poem. You know, "Я вас любил, любовь еще быть может, в душе моя угасла не совсем." This is how I was hiding behind these languages. And I had to, because Russian language kind of saved me. If it wasn't for the fact that I spoke it fluently, you and I would not be sitting here and having this kind of conversation. Yeah, but it took me 16 years to be able to articulate myself and finally put Ngalle to the public domain. Yeah.
Okay. Eric, what was it like, because we don't live life with the intention of reliving life in print. So I find myself, struggling to remember the 10 years old Chinyere. But you just told us about the 8 years old Eric Ngalle. So I want to know, what is that thing that, that ability to go back and dig up past memories as far back as, when you were 8 years old and all that. Do you think in the process of getting all of that memory that somewhere in between you will use your discretion to like fill in the gaps, or do you think memories are accurate when relieved, after, ages and seasons, have passed?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, in terms of Ngalle, then if you see it, I captured 2 years and 2 months of high-level intensities of everything that happened in Russia. So Ngalle, I deliberately ended it in July 1999 when I came to Wales. But in order for the book to work, I had to go back to my earliest childhood memories, because that is what actually saved me. It would have been easy for me to just regurgitate the fact that I was born in Cameroon, I left Cameroon, I went to Russia, from Russia I came to Wales. That would have been a bit boring. Even though the tragic elements in the book are compact, but I wanted to tell this story in such a way that, in fact, when Dylan Moore read the book and he said, "Oh, Eric, if this were written by a white author, they would have been very famous." Well, I didn't write this book to become famous. I wrote this book because this is an integral part of my life. This is what happened. And even Richard was like, "Oh, Eric, there are certain things in this book that you should not include." I'm like, I'm regurgitating the truth. This is my life. It doesn't really matter how one judges me. I'm an older person now.
So you didn't try to sugarcoat?
I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I couldn't have. Otherwise, you become a fraud. You become. So this is my life.
Okay.
But the only thing that makes the book works is the memory of growing up as a child in Cameroon. The memory of my mother, the memory of my grandfather, the memory of my sisters and brothers, and then realizing that through the poetry of Alexander Pushkin, I had loved these people before, and the love that I had for them is something that oozes. It's like I cannot replace it. And once I came across this poem, I realized, okay, I'm going to tell the story as it is, but you should know that the memory of my love for you is the only thing that kept me going, despite the near tragedy of what happened in Cameroon. Yeah.
Okay. When we write about memory, like in hindsight, do you think we put judgment on memory? Like, for example, I've had experiences. I had an experience in Nigeria, talking about memoirs now. I had an experience in Nigeria, like, I used to love dogs a lot. So my daddy would bring them home to the house and all that. But after a while, we realized that, there's this smell that comes with having dogs in the house. And whenever I go outside, the breath of fresh air, I come into the house and then we open the balcony. Instead of fresh air, there's this thing that just comes in. I'm like, I can't handle it. So I began to have this thing. I cut off that part of the house. I stopped going there, till the dog was taken to the village to stay with my cousins and all that. And then I was the first person. We cleaned the whole place, mopped it up and all that. And that was the end of my relationship with dogs, just because of that smell. But something happened years later. So I was running. Somebody was, all these people that sell things, carrying bananas on their heads and all that. And then a dog gave me the chase. Or perhaps the dog was coming to touch me and play with me, but I was like, oh my God, that sense of guilt from years back. I started running. I didn't know when I jumped the fence, and I caused a lot of damage. I had to pay for people's wares that I had scattered on the road and all that. But looking back now as an adult, I'm trying to chide myself and say, Chinyere, no, perhaps the dog was coming to play with me.
Yeah.
But the guilt made me run. And the dog gave me the chase and all that, either in anger or excitement. I can't even recollect. Do you think, as an adult, writing about the past, something that has happened over a period of time, that you have a finer understanding of things, do you think that imposes on the actual outcome or how those things played out in your writing?
Yes, this is what when you are doing a PhD, they teach you about this kind of your crafting, but when you are writing as a natural writer, you tell it as it is. You tell it, and I'm glad that I wrote this book before I came to do my master's at Swansea University or doing a PhD, because I think it would have influenced how I wrote it. But the good thing about writing an autobiography or a memoir is, unlike fiction writer, you are not restricted. You don't paint metaphors or paint images. You write the story as it happened. Weirdly, when my daughter read this story, she said to me, Dad, if this were fiction, your character would have been killed. Yes, that is that is the very nature of this book. However, the first time I knew I was going to write this book was in the summer of 1998.
Okay.
I was living in a place called Babushkinskaya, and I met...
In Russia?
Yes, in northern Moscow.
Okay.
And I met two Nigerians, and these men introduced themselves to me as businessmen. They were buying and selling fake dollars, rubbish. If I had money, they would have scammed me. But I became their front man because I spoke the language so well. I was contacting business people. And we got about $5,000 from a Russian businessman who lived in Vladivostkaya. But they managed to find where I lived. So they came to our house, caught us, battered us, but I managed to move from Babushkinskaya, took the brown line to Belaruskaya, and from Belaruskaya I went to Sheremetyevo airport. Valentine was waiting for me. I had bought a 500-pound Zimbabwean passport, Mr. Osmili. But when I arrived at the check-in desk, the lady looked at me and she called security. So the security guard carried me to the bathroom. That was the first time I saw myself. I had golf ball sizes on my head where these Russian people had, but I was bleeding. I didn't know. And she said to me, I cannot leave Russia on this aeroplane because wherever this plane goes, it will be grounded. I'm begging her. I'm like, I don't really care where this plane is going. I need to go. But I didn't. So when I left Sheremetyevo, then I went to Kievskaya. And Kievskaya is the diplomatic corpus in central Moscow. This is where all the embassy officials live. And next to it was the British Chamber of Commerce. I went there and I met a girl called Sophie. But I told Sophie everything. But now I was Mr. Osmili Manjola Tamvani, a Zimbabwean from Bulawayo. So she was like, you have to go to the Zimbabwean embassy. But I knew if I go to the Zimbabwean embassy, I'll be arrested. So though I used...
Well, you needed to escape from Russia.
Yes, I did. So that was the first time I told this story to someone and they recorded it. The only problem is I wasn't a Cameroonian anymore. I was now a Zimbabwean. So writing this story, the template was already there. But how do I make it so that it is consumed by the public? Again, this is where I had to go back to my memory. So if you see the book, it's written in two ways. the stories
Yeah.
and my memories. Yeah.
Okay. Then wow, that's a unique. You know I'm in Nigeria, right?
Yeah, we are brothers. People talk about place, memory, language, trauma, and there are triggers. So I'm very comfortable to tell you about Ngalle because I've reached that stage where I have removed myself from those experiences. This is now a book. You can read it as you can read it as fiction, how you like.
So there's a sense of detachment from this.
Yes,
now.
I had to. In fact, this is why I had to write this book. Our famous man John Gawa says there are certain books that no matter how long you avoid them, they'll bite you in the buttocks for them to be written.
Okay.
So that is
That
is it. But in 2015, I went to the YMCA to visit a friend of mine, and I thought, oh my, I've completely exhausted, like I've gotten rid of everything, and I came to the desk, and this woman like, hey, excuse me, you know we don't sell food here on a Saturday. And as soon as she started talking, I regressed back to the memory of 1996, and I saw my father's auntie, the woman who was pivotal to trigger this journey. I regressed, seriously. And this is one of the, when I sent this poem to Amy Wack, I begged her not to publish this poem. Because this is, you say, you cannot mince your words. So I'm not going to read this poem to you, it's on page 44. So this is it. I regressed. So no matter how comfortable I am, there are some questions that will take me back to. So I'll just choose a random chapter, right?
Okay. Because I think you've been reading it for a while.
Okay, so I'll just open the page and just read.
Just read.
Okay.
Don't be selective. Just read. I just wanted to have a feel of your writing.
Okay.
You know, beyond the stories you've told us.
Okay. Home. I was in my mother's kitchen once more, and I was sat on the ewongo, whilst my mother sat with her back against the kitchen entrance. My younger sister Quinta had dry tears on her cheeks. The eerie silence was invasive. My mother handed me a letter addressed to Mr. Eric Ngalle Charles. The letter was from Chief Justice Paul of the Courts of Justice and Peace, Boya, Southwest Province, Republic of Cameroon. It was as if all the lizards of the village knew of my impending demise, for they too had congregated and were holding their own conference on the beam that ran around the kitchen. It was as if the weaver birds, which had built a colony on the jackfruit tree behind my mother's kitchen, had dreamed of this day, for they too were silent. I spent the best part of my childhood with my late paternal grandmother, Mbamba Meremero, in this house. I ate food from the fireside that formed our shrine in this house. I slept in the room where my father died in this house. I must admit though, it was a terrifying experience sleeping in that room. I was so scared my mind would form images of different people who had passed to join our ancestors. These images would then turn into skeletons. I saw shadows moving around the room. We had no lights, just a small kerosene lamp that I had to switch off before sleeping. I would not sleep and feign tears until my grandmother came to sing me a lullaby. She ended up sleeping in the room with me. I tended to my father's grave just behind the kitchen. I loved his family and they loved me. Then the letter from Chief Justice Paul. That changed my life. Yeah. But there is something weird. Because when I wrote the introduction to this book, I started with are those not shadows lurking in the place I once called home? Underneath this kitchen is our family shrine. Behind this kitchen is my father's grave. Yesterday you loved me. Today your faces mask so much hatred, so much disdain. Did we not fish in Moray together? Did we not climb the hills of Wele together? Even the moon was silent as it hid behind angry clouds, the likes of which seldom trouble African skies. But as I stepped forward to set the wheels in motion that will carry me into damnation, I could hear my mother's voice piercing through the night skies. My mother called me in the voices of my ancestors and those before her. My mother cried, Agbewolo atimbangundu, Agbewolo atimbangundu, weye umaweya weyanje, weya umamo kakangwema. So I turned around and I followed my mother's voice. But there was no new dawn seeping through the horizon. You see, my mother's voice may have halted my actions on that day. But I, Yomandene, the guardian on the mountain where my grandmother lived after her death, a mountain of broken heart, I, Ekule, the wise one, I, Moja, the one who comes and goes, I, Ngalle, I'll have my revenge in this life and not wait for the next. So I thought.
Please. That was really deep. And to think you utilize this.
I had to understand that these things, this is what happened in my life. And, you know, the weirdest thing happened when I went to Cameroon in 2020 to launch this book. My sister came with her 3 sons. And they were conversing, they apologized, they said what they did to me in 1996 was a tragedy, I should forgive them. It didn't make no difference to me. You know, I went back to Cameroon as a successful writer. I had been awarded with the Creative Wales Award, which is the highest amount of money you can give to an individual writer. So these are not things that matter to me. But I didn't realize that my sister was trying to use me as a front person for what her next moves were. So, when I went to Cameroon this time around, she sent a delegation to the house, like, oh, Eric, the family is falling apart, talk to them, only for me to find out 2 weeks before I was coming that she sold the family land. So, this book had all the elements of a tragedy, not a Greek tragedy. And I had to turn it around. I didn't do it alone, you know. At the airport.
Call it an intercontinental tragedy.
It is. It does. But like you said, I keep going back to that kind of bond that I have with my mom. And she did something at the airport, and this is what actually I think saved me. You know, I told Taz this already because my mother she avoided my gaze. When I looked at her, I noticed that she was crying. And as a young man, I'm thinking, maybe staying at home is the best option. Because I don't want to see my mother cry, given our history. You know, so this story in this book is not just my story. This is my mother's story. And so my mother took my hands into her hands, and one by one, she gave each of my fingers a gentle bite. I still did not, because I've tried that with my daughter here in Cardiff. She's like, Dad, please don't. You know, but on that day, she was entering into an entente cordial between her, myself, and our ancestors. That wherever I went, my ancestors will bring me back to her. Yeah, so I, Eric Ngalle.
Wow. Just let's give Eric. It's a bit too much to take. Can we shake up things a little bit? Where we get.
I'm gonna dance now.
Please. Yeah.
I dance in Carnarvon. You know, Ivor Abglin paraphrased Chinua Achebe's proverb. When 2 elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers.
Yeah, so when you dance, your waist.
The grass, you understand? I kill the grass. So I can't risk it. I can't.
All right. It's been an amazing time, sharing your memoir with you, and I have a lot of other questions, but I want to hold on a bit so that you can share some part of your poetry with us before we, throw it open for everyone. I'm sure you all have a lot of questions to ask Eric.
That's
so
your copy.
Yeah, that's my copy. Yeah, he didn't give me a complimentary copy. So
Hey, listen.
Oh,
Let's not go there. Writers are broke, unless you are publishing in Welsh. Because if you are publishing in Welsh,
we are rich in words.
Yeah. So I'm learning Welsh now because if you are publishing in the Welsh language, the Arts Council gives you like 10 grand.
Really? Pre-Honda. Bring the Darini. Yeah, let's go ahead.
Dwin Hofi, Triok, Sharai Kamrai.
Now I'm lost.
For me, you know, this homelands is who I truly am. It's a combination of everything, you know. As a Cameroonian, we are lucky that our country was a fandango for many European nations.
Sorry. We would like to know, because you've been throwing some words and, you know, can you explain?
A lot of European nations used Cameroon as their dancing ground.
Okay.
Yes. So the Portuguese thieves, the Portuguese explorers who came there, slip of the tongue.
Spoonerism.
So, our great-grandparents spoke Portuguese. My grandfather spoke German. And we are now speaking French and English. So this book has all the languages that I speak, including Welsh, Russian, and Pidgin. But it has one of my favorite place in the world, which is my mother's kitchen. So this book is dedicated to my mother. But there is, it says, under the mutando muwa in my mother's kitchen, where chickens sleep at night, Mama, I first learned beauty in the word rija. When sleep consumes a child, yet they fight. Short burst of 5 seconds nap, shaking as one wakes, feeling as if one were to fall off a cliff. Under the mutando muwa in your kitchen, I saw a baby chick standing on its mother's back, rijaing. Because this, regardless of what I do, this is where I go. This is my mother's kitchen nourishes me, and the poem that I wrote. Can you read that poem, please?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My mother's kitchen, and I did what John Gower told us to do. That each of those stanzas are written in such a way that they can become chapters in the book. So that's that poem on its own. Then I'll read from Homelands. Please.
I'd like to say something before I read this
Thank
from Eric's collection. Eric seems to me as a child who has been denied his chicken. Because he's been mentioning chicken in all the poems. Did you hear that? We need to find Father Francis. Alright, I will be reading this. It's titled My Mother's Kitchen by Eric Charles Ngalle. 3 black stones form the fireplace, charcoal and charred wood. I never met my father. My mother said he would rest his feet on the biggest stone. I have looked for his footprints. My mother would lean her back on the wood tree trunk as she cooked. Above the 3 black stones is Ngalle. Here she keeps matove, dried latex sap, a fire starter. There is always a lone venju cockroach names, smiling in the Ngalle. There's mbai. Here you would find smoked fish, malolo, strong kanda and kuta. At times, dried meat ready for the pot. Then you have mbanda. Ngalle and mbai are linked to the mbanda using strings from the spine of palm tree branch. It oscillates, inviting the venju. On the mbanda, she cooks wood, dried wood to the left, easy reach. Here you would find dried smoked meat. When meat travels from mbanda to Ngalle, we would have visitors. If you place pawpaw leaves, fever grass leaves, bango leaves on the mbanda, children will start crying. It is time for
Merungi, enema.
Okay, do I go on?
No, you can.
Yeah, because you have a lot to explain.
Yes, you
have
can.
a lot to unpack. In this. The only strange word I could actually connect to is kanda, which is like bomo.
We love it.
Yeah,
we love
it. There is no English word for this.
Cow skin.
Oh, is that cow?
Yes.
Okay, cow skin, because there's actually the one of gold.
No, this is.
It varies across. All right.
That's cow skin. I love it. I go to the market in Cardiff City Centre and like, you eating cow skin? I say, yeah, because my teeth are very strong, so I have to bite into. That's my defense.
Okay.
Yeah, but I go back to my mother's kitchen because this is the source of everything, and it goes back to that question. I don't know for the MA students where they'll ask you, where do stories come from? Yeah, where do stories come from? So the 3 firestones with my father's footprints, I just deliberately placed that in there because actually, when my mom speaks of my father, I see her as my father. I have no memory of my dad. Yes, I have never seen a picture of him, but yeah, they say I look like him. So I'm going to read to you a poem on page 47. Because some people think the issue of racism, they own privileges to be. So I was traveling on bus number 18 from Canton to Ely. The bus was empty. And then this guy comes and sits next to me. And this was a pandemic time. I'm looking at the driver, I'm thinking, for real? And this is what transpired. You have a funny accent, he said. You seem okay, he continued. It is these half-castes, the black people born in this country, the ones spoiling things for everyone. I saw Gary yesterday selling legal highs to kids in the alleyway. I have never met a black man called Gary, I thought. Do you know Gary's mom? She's never had a job in her life. Her children look like those in the Red Cross leaflets. Those children you see in Africa. Sometimes I wish Hitler won the war. Then we could keep this country clean. So where are you from then, mate? I paused. Thoughts like pigeons flying in, then out of my head. Yes. Where was I from? A Bantu tribesman? A Bakweri boy? How long must one be in a place to become it? Funny enough, mate, I am from Zimbabwe. Do you know all those white people who came to Zimbabwe with Cecil Rhodes? Of the 3 million people Cecil killed, 1 million survived. Now us, their great-grandchildren, have armed ourselves with poisonous darts and crocodile's bile, killing Cecil Rhodes' compatriots one by one. Blimey, he said. How long have you been in this country? Again, I paused. Arrivals and departures mean different things to different migrants. Since yesterday, I said. As I reached into my man bag, I asked him, are you by any chance a white Zimbabwean? He pressed the stop button, spoke to the driver, and brought out his mobile phone. Excuse me, can I speak to the police? At my stop, just off Grand Avenue, I said, thank you, drive. Excuse me, mate, are you truly a white Zimbabwean headhunter? The driver asked. I laughed. Thank you.
Especially in the peak of COVID, that's some conversation.
Yes, yeah, this is intense, man. Just sit over there, you know.
And it was just the two of you in
That's
the
it.
empty bus. Eric, I'd like to ask you a question. You said something about losing your identity, traveling from Russia to the United Kingdom as a 64 years old Zimbabwean instead of Eric Ngalle from Cameroon.
Yeah.
So, do you still feel that sense of identity, or have you been able to connect with Eric from Cameroon as against Eric returning from Russia to the United Kingdom?
No, I've completed the circle now.
Okay.
And effectively, I am a bridge builder. I kind of now link Cameroon and Wales. I love the countries for different reasons. You know, Cameroon is where half of my umbilical cord was buried. That is forever going to be home. Wales gave me back my voice, a platform, and thanks to it, my mother no longer cries at night. So I kind of, I've gone a full circle. But let me tell you a very short story. I did my first performance in a place in Riverside. They've transformed, it was a pub, but it's now houses. When I was in there, I met one of my favorite Welsh writers. There are plenty, but Graham Davies came there. And Graham Davies, after I finished, he gave me his card. And it was like Graham Davies, PhD. I'd never met anyone with a PhD before. This is like 2000. Last week when I met Graham Davies, I gave him my card, Ngalle, PhD. So we've come a full circle.
Oh.
You understand? But these are the people who kind of set the standard for me. Graham introduced me to his wonderful poem called Rough Guide. Mena Elvin introduced me to Blind Man's Kiss. And Tom Cheeseman introduced me to Claf Abekir, Conflict in Abekir. And so this is it. So this is home for me. I don't have the only identity crisis I have now is when I go back to my mother's kitchen. Because let me tell you what, my mother's kitchen, I don't know why she insists on using wet wood, mangrove, to cook. So it's filled with smoke. So when I was there recently, I'm like, okay, I want to show off. I've come from Cardiff. I want to make some Welsh bitter bread, something like that. Yeah. So I'm in the kitchen. Within 1 minute, I legged it. I vamoosed it. And I said, Eric, where are you? It was filled with smoke. And then I had misplaced where she puts her salt and everything. And then she called me, Eric, when are you going back to Wales?
Oh, your mother must be such an inspiration.
She doesn't know what I do.
All over your work. It's almost like this is the story of your mom.
It is.
And you know, somewhere there. Yes.
Well, I know that you're also a musician, and although I haven't seen you perform, I've read about you performing. I think there is a sense of musicality which I remember reading. I reviewed your book for Poetry Wells, and I want to ask you about that sense of musicality which you carry within your poetry in particular. Would you like to maybe, can you say a little about that?
But let me just put it very clear. If Tas speaks of music, I can only sing in Bakweri or Bantu. I cannot sing in English. I tried singing in Russian, like this poem on page 33, which is dedicated to Gran and Vera. In order to get into this poem, I had to get into the head of the Russian musician called Andrei Gubin. And there is a song that he wrote, and he said, Mamuchka ne skuchayet, ya vernus, ya znаю точно, может днем, может ночью, вы меня не забывай. Мамочка не скучает, я вернусь, я знаю точно, может днем, может ночью, вы меня не забывай. There were no screams, no wailing, no dancing, no choir group singing, just an empty bench, the lavочка. Yesterday, Chocha Vera was here teaching me Kak Vam Dila, not Kak Tibia Dila, nor Kak Vas Dila, in 3 cases in Russian speak. Mamuchka, the Lavuchka speaks of time, knowing when the children will come, when they will go. Lavuchka is a resting place. 3:30 p.m., the pitter-patter of feet, children, boys, girls sitting, gossiping, some crying. Mama, ya hachu yidu. Mother, can I please eat? At 5:30 p.m., Lavuchka embraces teenagers. They share one miasny heroic meat pie between 4. At 7 p.m., Lavuchka welcomes young adults, playing guitars, eating semichki, hide and seek behind shrubs and bushes. At 8:30 p.m., Maladaya Zhenshina, women come in droves, crying of failed careers. Yahatel beat Balerinoi, talking of lost love. Then, just like they came, slowly they disappear. Where are the men? Lavuchka ignores men. They labor in various dachas, fruit picking, stealing jars of salted cucumber. Valeria is always drunk. At 9:30 p.m., Totuchka Vera comes, sits in the Lavuchka. She speaks of the alignments of the stars, of her 3 dead husbands, the glory days of the Red Army, chasing Nazis across Siberia, her wrinkles like markings. She speaks of permanent longing. Her neck moves slowly, scanning the horizon. It has been 3 weeks now. Children come and go, young boys and girls, I saw them all gossiping, playing guitar, eating semichki. 3 weeks. Chocha Vera did not come out. Excuse me. It's there Chukwudi-Okeh. 3 weeks ago, Chukwudi-Okeh died. Velikaya Babushkaya Chukwudi-Okeh. I did not cry. Chukwudi-Okeh died of age. No wailings, no choir group singing, just a Russian bench which reminded me every evening at 9:30 p.m. that Chukwudi-Okeh was dead. Mamuchka niskuchaye, ya vernus jasna je točka, может днем, может ночью, вы меня не забываете. Thank you so much.
Wow. Yeah, translate, just a little bit of translation.
Mamuchka niskuchaye.
Yeah, because...
Mamuchka is mama.
Oh.
Niskuchaye, it means do not miss me. Ya vernus jasna je točka, I'll be back, of that I am certain. Может днем, maybe at dawn, может ночью, maybe at night. But please, whatever you do not forget about me.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, in the absence of any other questions, because I'm already in my emotions, Shamita, you should have a question.
You did say that you know quite a few languages. So I'm just wondering how were you able to pick up these languages? Like you said, you were in Russia, you spoke fluently. So
Oh, add French to the mix.
yeah, so different languages. So
Yeah.
how were you able to?
This is a beautiful thing that we have as Cameroonians, again, because of the many visitors who came, and some of the encounters were atrocious. But at least the one thing that we picked were the languages. So when I was in Russia, the circumstances that I found myself warranted me to learn the language. So within 3 months, I could speak it. So when I came back to Stavropol, I became the official language translator for all the illegal immigrants. That was it. Yeah. But I became too comfortable in Wales because it's only now that I'm starting to Sharia Camry. Because in Cardiff,
Sharia Camry?
Speaking Welsh.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Eric has been throwing things.
Cardiff makes you too comfortable, you know, it's a melting pot of different languages, different culture, but in terms of that, English is still like one of the showing off kind of languages that everybody speaks it. Yeah, so, but no, since I met with Ivor and we are touring Wales, I'm now learning the language.
You wanted to ask a question? Okay.
In terms of your writing, please, when you bring your own language into it, it spices things up. Yeah, so please do not be, and you don't, for people who do poetry, you don't owe no one the translation.
Yeah,
If you are, yes, if you are interested, although Google will not show you back here. Hello. I think he's going to be a writer. Yeah, so you please, it's a wonderful thing. And this came to me after 16 years of writing, because I was traveling with John Gower, and I wanted to show off. You know, John Gower is like, Eric, we've left Aberystwyth, we are going to Cardiff. Do you have trees in Cameroon? Oh, look at you. What do you mean? Do we have trees in Cameroon? You know, there's a size of Cameroon bigger than the UK, which is forest. So of course, we have trees. So he said, okay, name 3 types of trees in Cameroon. And I am going for the popular option, you know, Iroko tree. He said, no. In your language. And then so I said, there's an Ewu tree, there's a Bangu tree. I only know 3 types of trees in my language. Ewu, Etolongo, and Bangu. But these trees have deadly secrets. So if you came to my house or to my village and you visited me and I didn't like you, and I wanted you to build a house, I'll give you the Bangu tree to build, because the Bangu tree is hollow. In the winter, the snakes, the centipedes, the scorpions, they hide inside this tree. Yes. So if the Portuguese decide to come again to Cameroon, we'll give them the Bangu tree to build their houses. You see what I'm going with this? And then the Etolongo tree is the only tree that they use to make the djembe. And the djembe communicates with the wrestler. So if the djembe player wants to tell the wrestler to be aggressive, there's a way that so it communicates. And then the other tree is the etolongo. The etolongo is the only tree that they use to mount where the drummers play. So so once you name something, you give it life.
Wow.
So, and this is what John Gower did, and that is how I effectively found my voice. Yeah.
Oh wow. I guess we've come to the end of the sessions, and it's been an amazing day really listening to Charlotte talk about, I'll never forget that expression, ecological emergency in our work. And then Shamita romanticizing nature in Wales while connecting back to memories of her safari days in India. And then Rebecca with the historical sense, telling us about King Arthur and serenading us all through the exploration around the castles of Penard and the Three Cliff Bay and all that, and then coming here to share all of that writing. It's been an amazing day, and I wish we can just go on. I've been finding reasons, asking people, do you have a question? Just so that we can just stay and have Eric, because Eric is full of stories, and the stories are inexhaustive, but I don't think we can get all of the stories today, so I'm just going to pipe down and wait for the sequel to this. And then your fictional work that is a product of your PhD and all that. Eric, we wish you all the very best.
Thank you.
It's amazing having you here, and you've been a blessing.
Thank you. Now, where's the food?
Yeah.